Hello, everybody. Hamilton, Burlington. Welcome to the Bay Area Climate Change Council's first ever Ask Me Anything event. To those tuning in, we're happy to have you join us here tonight. My name is Bianca Caramento, and I manage the Bay Area Climate Change Council, otherwise known as BACC. I'll be emceeing tonight's event, asking your questions to city representatives live. But before we dive in, we wish to recognize that our work takes place on the traditional Indigenous territories of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, Six Nations of the Grand River, and Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is part of the Dish with One Spoon agreement. So, thank you again for joining us tonight for this AMA on climate action. Climate action is really about keeping this planet livable. And of course, most of us want to provide a safe and livable world for our loved ones, but many of us struggle with knowing where or how to start. That's where we come in. BACC is made up of organizations across Hamilton and Burlington that are committed to moving the needle on climate change. BACC researches turnkey solutions for all three levels of government so that we can skip right to the action part of climate action. If I were to put it quite plainly, we want government to steal our homework. Take it, run with it. We want to see action. If you're someone who wants to stop stressing about climate change and start doing something about it, subscribe to BACC's e-newsletter and access everything you'll need to join the fight. Now, let's turn to the main event. Tonight, residents will have the chance to hear about what the cities of Hamilton and Burlington are doing to tackle climate change. You'll also get a chance to ask questions live. Each city will have no more than 5 minutes each to share with us some of the climate action that they're most proud of. That said, we want to leave as much time as possible for your questions. Speaking of which, to those of you who sent questions in advance, thank you. For those listening, feel free to put your questions in the chat at any time. We have 4 simple rules tonight, and you can see them pinned in the chat. In a nutshell, this is an Ask Me Anything event on climate action. If your question isn't climate change related, it will not be asked. Number 2, any comments involving personal insults or hateful language will not be tolerated. Tell folks exactly how you feel, but keep it respectful. That's housekeeping. Now, let's hear about climate action in our community. To kick things off tonight, from the City of Hamilton, we're joined by Trevor Imhoff, Senior Project Manager for Air Quality and Climate Change, and Andrea McDowell, Project Manager for Air Quality and Climate Change. Welcome, Trevor and Andrea, over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Bianca, and thank you all so much for having us. We are very happy to be here. Again, my name is Trevor Imhoff, and I'm joined by my colleague, Andrea McDowell, and we are part of the Air Quality and Climate Change team with the City of Hamilton. Next slide, please. And we can skip to the next slide as well. Great, thank you. Hamilton does have historical experience in sustainability, creating greenhouse gas inventories, and setting greenhouse gas targets. However, more needs to be done. Following the climate change emergency declaration, the city is now focusing on creating specific actions with financial commitments, timelines, and indicators to track progress. The presented information hereafter represents the work the city has done since Hamilton's climate emergency declaration in March of 2019. Next slide, please. Following City Council's climate emergency declaration, a multi-departmental staff working group utilizing the most up-to-date information submitted this foundational report that Council approved. This report sets 9 overarching goals and 51 areas of focus for the entire city and every department moving forward to collectively reduce greenhouse gas emissions and prepare for future impacts. This includes the creation of a community energy and emissions plan and climate impact adaptation plan. Next slide, please. The City of Hamilton continues to follow best practices and current scientific information from leading national and international institutions and organizations. It is important to consider both climate mitigation and climate adaptation. We now have set baselines establish scientific-based targets and meaningful actions for reducing greenhouse gas emissions and getting to a net carbon zero community by 2050, while also preparing for the impacts of climate change. Next slide, please. The Community Energy and Emissions Plan is Hamilton's detailed strategy for the energy transition needed from inefficient use of fossil fuels to energy efficient society that uses clean forms of energy. This plan will include detailed actions, financial commitments, timelines, and indicators to ensure we are on the right path. It will not be easy, but we believe this plan will overall save millions of dollars in costs, create good paying local jobs, reduce harmful air pollution, and contribute to an overall healthier environment. We invite anyone interested to learn and stay engaged at the website below. I'll now hand it over to my colleague, Andrea. Next slide, please.
All right, thank you so much. So the global carbon cycle is very slow. It takes about 30 years for carbon in the atmosphere to have a noticeable effect on the climate. This means the climate will continue to change for decades after emissions stop. The changes we've experienced in our local climate, increases in rain, more intense storms, extreme heat, more erosion, and so on, will continue and get worse for some time to come. A report available at the website link describes the changes we expect to see in detail. Governments at all levels need to take steps to protect people and businesses from these changes, and this is what a climate adaptation plan does. We look at the changes in the local climate we expect to see, then consider how those changes will affect people and their livelihoods. Together with our internal experts and community organizations, we rank those consequences so we can tackle the most serious ones first. Then we come up with projects and policies we can implement that will reduce or eliminate those consequences. Next slide, please. Temperature increases are the most obvious climate impact, but another example is increased rainfall leading to flooding. A municipal government can change things like how much pavement there is, stormwater drainage ditches and ponds. These can reduce the consequences of flooding even as rainfall increases. We can also look at the social consequences of these flooding events. People displaced from basement apartments, for example, may need assistance in finding new affordable housing and replacing their belongings. All of these changes may involve other levels of government and community agencies, so we have to work together. Many adaptation projects have been underway for years. The city has not been waiting for the adaptation plan to be complete before we begin. For example, Public Works is separating combined storm sewers. But the plan will make sure that we are using our resources to address the most significant impacts first, that all of the biggest impacts are being addressed, and that our efforts as a city are coordinated and effective. Right now, the city is finalizing a list of draft actions to share with the community and with internal stakeholders to prioritize, then discuss implementation. Community will be critical in creating and implementing climate solutions, so please do visit the link to stay involved. Next slide, please. This is just a brief slide to show some of the achievements the city has completed since passing the climate emergency declaration in 2019. Feel free to visit any of those links to be informed about them. And next slide, that wraps up our presentation.
Thank you, Andrea and Trevor. We're looking forward to diving into some questions with you. In the meantime, we're going to move over to the city of Burlington for their presentation. And a reminder to please keep putting your questions in the chat. If you have questions for the city representatives about what the cities are doing about climate change, this is your time to ask those questions. So throw those questions in the chat. We'll be sure to get to them shortly after this presentation. Now, from the city of Burlington, tonight we are joined by Lynn Robichaud, Manager of Environmental Sustainability, and Fleur Storrs-Hogan, Sustainability Project Coordinator. Welcome, Lynn and Fleur, over to you.
Thank you, Bianca, and thank you for providing us with the opportunity to speak tonight on what the City of Burlington is doing to take action on climate change and work towards being a net carbon neutral, resilient community. As Bianca mentioned, my colleague Fleur is also here tonight to join in the following question and answer period. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. City Council declared a climate emergency back in 2019 and directed staff to apply a climate lens to plans and actions, including the strategic work plan and future budgets, and report back with a climate action plan. In response to the declaration, city staff reports now include a section on climate implications. Council has also highlighted the importance and significance of climate change by including climate-related actions in the strategic plan and their vision to focus. Next slide, please. The next two slides are very busy, but are meant to convey how the city has progressed in its climate actions, such as our agenda for action to reduce emissions back in 2007. Although not approved by council, it did plant the seed to include climate actions in their next strategic plan. In 2014, we completed our first community energy plan, but it was still a struggle for us to include climate-related targets. But around the same time, we experienced the 2013 ice storm, followed by a major flood in 2014, which definitely brought attention to the need to take more action on climate change. Next slide, please. This is a continuation of the last slide, and I'll be touching on a number of these actions throughout the presentation, but suffice it to say, there's a lot going on. Next slide, please. Following the climate emergency declaration, Council approved our climate action plan with a target for Burlington to be a net carbon neutral community by 2050. Next slide, please. There are 7 program areas identified in the plan, where I'm highlighting 5 of them here. The city is partnering with Burlington Green to develop a community-based electric mobility strategy, which we hope to complete by September. We are working with a group of students from McMaster University's Engineering and Public Policy program to research best practices to support renewable energy in the community. Staff recently presented a report on next steps to develop and implement a home energy efficiency retrofit program. Our planning staff recently updated the sustainable building and development guidelines for new buildings, and our transportation staff are working on finalizing the integrated mobility plan to support active and sustainable transportation options in Burlington. And on a related front, Council approved the cycling plan last year. Next slide, please. Council also approved the corporate energy and emissions management plan in 2019 with a target for city operations to be net carbon neutral by 2040. Some related initiatives include our new City View Park Pavilion is being constructed to be net carbon neutral. The expansion of Joseph Brant Museum achieved LEED Platinum with the use of geothermal and a green roof. We're continuing to expand our EV charging network on city property. A solar capital plan for city facilities is being finalized. We're completing deep energy efficiency retrofit assessments for 4 city facilities. And we continue to seek opportunities to green the city's fleet. Next slide, please. And similar to Hamilton, recognizing that the city and our community is already being impacted by climate change, my colleague Fleur has been working diligently over the past couple of years to complete a climate projections report for Burlington and a climate change impact story map, which were presented to council last year. She has been managing staff, community stakeholders, and our consultant to complete a risk and vulnerability assessment and identify actions that can be employed to adapt to a changing climate. A draft of Climate Resilient Burlington will be released this spring. Next slide, please. This slide highlights a number of actions that the city and Halton region are already involved in to improve resiliency in the community related to stormwater management, emergency preparedness, forestry, heat, health, and planning. Next slide, please. So thank you. That was sort of rapid fire. It was just a highlight of actions we're involved in. These are sites that you can learn more about what we're doing, our blog, our website, and the city's engagement portal. And we can be contacted through our email. Thank you.
Thank you, Fleur and Lynn. It's now time for questions. For those that are joining us live, please keep typing your questions in the chat. We want to see all the questions that you have. given the fact that it's been a while now that the cities have declared their climate emergency, and it's time we ask a few questions about what has been done to get a sense of the climate action in our community. A reminder though, if your question isn't climate change related, it won't be answered. And a reminder to please keep things respectful. One final note, these folks are extremely knowledgeable, but there may be questions that are asked tonight that require Lynn, Fleur, Trevor, or Andrea to check back with their other colleagues for more information. Should that happen, follow-up answers will be posted on BACC's event page and on our website shortly after tonight. Now, let's dive in. We know for our first question, we know that urban sprawl contributes to climate change. What we want to know from our representatives tonight are what are the municipalities of Hamilton and Burlington doing to reduce urban sprawl or mitigate the effects of urban sprawl on climate change? We'll kick things off with City of Hamilton.
Great, thanks, Bianca. I'll take a first crack at that. So for a while now, the City of Hamilton has implemented a regulatory framework that directs growth in our urban boundary and across areas that help to build upon our existing and planned transit. So along key transit nodes and corridors, that's where the growth is planned for. And furthermore, many people will be aware of this. City Council did approve through grids to make the decision to freeze our urban boundary and direct all future growth within our existing urban boundary. So that means intensification, more buildings per multi-unit buildings, and that will ultimately result, we think, and through science and low technical carbon scenario modeling, that transportation emission sources will be avoided as well, because people can walk and take transit instead of driving their car.
Great, thanks for that. Okay, Burlington, did you want to hop on that question? What are you doing for urban sprawl and mitigating climate change there?
Actually, it's a fairly easy question for us to answer. So Burlington, for a number of years, has had a firm urban-rural boundary that even existed before the Green Belt was established. So our growth and development, similar to what Hamilton is doing, we're focusing on our major transit station areas, around the GO train areas, major corridors, and the downtown area. Residents have probably seen a bit of change in our city over the years, but again, I think the change will bring about a more healthy, livable city, and that it will support sustainable transportation options, walking, cycling, and we're really trying to take an integrated approach as we plan for transportation and development across the city.
You want to maybe build on that a little bit, Lynn, with some of the thinking behind that? So maybe painting the picture for folks as to how exactly climate change and urban sprawl can connect, just so that folks get a sense of how what you're doing is making that impact.
Yeah, well, in terms of the city and the urban area, by making it more sort of compact, but directing growth in the right areas, again, near the major transit station areas, it provides an opportunity for sort of multimodal transportation options and cutting down on single occupied vehicle use. So people can walk to the transit station or bike or take the public transit. And development is often in multi-residential and citing commercial offices in close proximity, and that it just makes it more of a complete community, shall we say.
Fantastic. Another question that we received, and we'll move to the next question, is how are the cities of Burlington and Hamilton going to support residents who want to retrofit their homes? And so for the context of this question, given that each home that we live in requires energy to power it, to heat the home, to power up all of our appliances, et cetera, that requires energy, which results in emissions output. And upgrading a home so that we require less energy to do the things that we do costs money. And many residents need help to be able to afford some of those retrofits. Can either city speak to what municipalities can do and what you are planning to do to help residents in Hamilton and Burlington afford some of those upgrades. I'll start off with City of Burlington.
Thanks, Bianca. Great question. So very timely for us, staff. We just reported to Committee of Council last week on the work that we completed with the Center for Climate Change Management at Mohawk College with support from BACCC. A lot of work went into a feasibility study and program design for a home energy efficiency retrofit program in Burlington. Council was very supportive of the work we've done. We're looking at providing low interest loans to homeowners, focusing on those measures that will really help to decarbonize homes and support things like air source heat pumps, which most of our homes are heated by furnaces and using natural gas or heating oil. So next steps, we have to work on sort of a bylaw and application process and things like that, as well as a budget proposal for the next budget cycle. So it's all subject to the budget, but there's certainly a lot of interest in supporting homeowners that are low income. So, providing those low interest loans would be very helpful, but also something we want to establish in the city is sort of a concierge or delivery center program that homeowners can come to be a one-stop shop if they have questions about which program, whether it's Enbridge's or the federal government's or our program, which one suits their needs and will help them achieve their goals with their homes.
Fantastic. City of Hamilton, what have you got planned for retrofits?
Yeah, thanks, Bianca. I think this is a very important question and one that's vitally needed to meet our short-term and long-range greenhouse gas reduction targets. And we're very much following the same direction that the city of Burlington is. I'll maybe take a little step back as well and say between 2017 and 2019, we did form a partnership with the city of Burlington and Mohawk College for the creation of the Bay Area Climate Change Council, which Bianca now runs. And they've done some excellent work and policy research work for us on building retrofits and market readiness. And so we, as the city of Hamilton, we were actually able to use that information and apply for federal funding to essentially fast track our application to go from feasibility study to a detailed design study. And we are very hopeful and we have received positive feedback from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities that essentially that program will do pretty well what Lynn said. And we are very wanting to focus on older buildings, low-income, vulnerable populations, to ensure not only that we are reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but we're making people's lives more comfortable, their living conditions more comfortable, as well as their hopefully their utility bills as well, less costly as well, which is an important consideration of this program. So we continue to work to create this municipal program, but at the same time, we want to encourage residents to take a look at what is out there existing. And we've supported through letters of support our local nonprofit organization, Green Venture, who also administers Enbridge utilities winter weatherization for low-income individuals and families, as well as other retrofit programs that Enbridge offers, as well as there is an existing federal green homes grant through the federal government that homeowners can apply for as well.
Yeah, great point. And for folks who are watching who are interested in accessing any of those existing programs, if you go to BACC's website at BACCC.ca, there's information on the existing programs from both Enbridge and the federal government, should you be interested in upgrading your home and hopefully lowering your utility costs, because we know that the cost of living is not a pretty picture these days. So any help that residents can get, that's available on BACC's website. We got a great question in the chat. This one's about climate mitigation. So one of the biggest solutions for flood mitigation is having green infrastructure instead of paved surfaces. So can you please speak to the city's current plans to address some of the paved surfaces and looking at flood mitigation. I'll start off with City of Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Green infrastructure certainly has a lot of promise in terms of controlling flood and stormwater. It is something that is coming through in the adaptation plan that we're developing, and we expect that it will continue through, as well as through the community energy and emissions plan. I know that green development standards are also being considered there as a way of reducing emissions, and we're looking at how we can make these things work together so they can be more effective use of city resources.
Burlington, do you want to expand a little bit about what you're doing to look at some of those hard surfaces and how we might be able to avoid some flood impacts?
Well, with City of Burlington as well, we are also going to be looking at natural infrastructure through our plan, which, as Lynn mentioned, will be coming through to council in May of this year. But we're also involved in a project through the Municipal Natural Assets Inventory, and specifically looking at the Grindstone Creek watershed and looking at the benefits of nature, valuing nature, so that we basically valuing nature in that, you know, if we're removing it, how much is it going to cost us to put in hard infrastructure, right? So it's actually, if we maintain it as is, preserve it, we will benefit from that greatly. And the city has done a lot with flood mitigation as well. Because we had our flood in 2014, there have been a lot of programs offered to the community as well. So I could go into that later or now.
Let's hear about them. Yeah,
okay.
let's hear about them.
So working with Halton Region, because in Burlington we're a two-tiered municipality. So Halton Region does offer actually subsidies for homeowners to help, again, through the affordability perspective you mentioned before. They offer subsidies of between 50 to 100% to actually help reduce flood risk. So disconnecting your downspout, for example, is one such program. So there are a series of 4 that residents can apply for. And as I said, it's between 50 and 100%. And then tied to that as well, the City of Burlington offers a building permit fee waiver for some of this work as well. So that's linked to, again, flood reduction programs like the installation of a backwater valve, the installation of a sump pump, things like that. So there's sort of programs working hand in hand. So there you go.
Thanks, Laura. Okay, we're going to move to the next question. Oh, Trevor, I think
I was
you
just
want
going
to
to
hop
add,
in. Yeah.
I thought the audience might be interested in this as well. Just on a provincial-wide scale and standard, all municipalities moving forward, directed by the province of Ontario, will have to include green infrastructure in their asset management plans. So that's very much on the radar for our municipalities, as well as many others, obviously. And so what that means is public-owned green infrastructure like street trees will need to be included in asset management inventories and assessed similar to how gray assets are managed and tracked and inventoried. So that's a very promising regulation happening across the province of Ontario. And so not only does the City of Hamilton want to achieve that, and we will achieve that, I think it's also important, and we're looking at how do we utilize and further consult with, for example, local Indigenous voices to learn about traditional ecological knowledge as we go around in inventorying these assets. I think it would be a miss and a gap if we didn't include local Indigenous voices in that assessment. And so that's very much something that we would continue to work with through our urban Indigenous strategy that the City of Hamilton approved back in 2018. So just wanted to throw that out there as well. Thanks, Bianca.
Can you also paint the picture for us a little bit on that inventory and in practical terms, sort of what that will look like? So what will change? What's the current state right now? What will folks have to start doing, I guess, under that inventory? Do you have a sense?
That's a good question. And so the green asset management regulation won't be coming into place until 2024, I believe.
Okay.
So it's a few years out. But it's very much the Federation of Canadian Municipalities does have some courses and some guidelines on how to include green infrastructure within asset management plans. So we would look for guidance such as that. It really would be building off the existing data that the City of Hamilton has related to our green infrastructure, and building off work that we've done, for example, through the Urban Forest strategy, where we had people go out to conduct plot analysis to say this is how much X% the City of Hamilton has in terms of tree canopy per area.
Right. Okay. That's helpful. Thank you for that. Okay. We're going to move to the next question. This was also in the chat this evening, so thank you very much to the listener who sent us this one in. So the question has to do with public transit ridership. Does the City of Hamilton and Burlington have plans to encourage public transit ridership? And are you doing anything already to encourage public transit ridership? We're going to start off this one, I think, with City of Burlington. And I'll leave it open to Lynn or Fleur to take the first stab at that question.
Yeah, thanks, Bianca. Good question. Well, I have to say, I think every transit authority has taken a hit with the COVID and pandemic, and Burlington was actually doing a great job, I should say, Burlington Transit, before the pandemic hit, in increasing ridership. I think we had like this significant increase just before the pandemic hit. But they are certainly looking at options and service improvements that they can implement to increase ridership again. I know that they're looking at service enhancements, adding frequency to make transit more convenient overall. But they do provide free transit for seniors Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 2:30 p.m., as well as free transit for children 12 and under.
Fantastic. Great. City of Hamilton.
Yeah, I'll take a first stab, and by no means is this an all-encompassing work. There's lots of things happening across the City of Hamilton as it relates to transit and higher order transit. The most, I think, the biggest one, and that many will be aware of, is the federal and provincial announcement and the agreement with the City of Hamilton for their light rail transit, and overall, that's a commitment of $3.5 billion in transit, higher order transit infrastructure that is happening, that is going to happen in Hamilton, and that's one of the largest infrastructure funding for the City of Hamilton in its history. But we're not going to wait for the LRT to come to encourage people to take public transit. And so currently there's approximately 267 buses that the City of Hamilton operates, and there are plans with capital municipal tax dollars, as well as a federal ISIP grant to expand that bus fleet to an additional 85 buses by 2025. So building more and having more buses across the City of Hamilton with more frequent stops will encourage people to take public transit. And we do, council just approved last September, I believe, something similar to what Burlington just mentioned about a free bus passes for youths. I believe it's either 12 or 10 or under. I'm not sure about the exact age, but if you have a Presto card and you're within that age or under, you get to ride the bus for free. It's a pilot program going into 2023, and we'll see how it goes, but really encouraging our youth to take public transit. There are many other programs related to incentivizing, for example, active school travel planning that we do through public health and our planning and economic development folks, to take a look at how kids and parents and teachers are getting to schools and finding the best active and sustainable routes for them. And that's just a snapshot. If people are interested, you can Google City of Hamilton 10-year transit strategy to learn more.
Fantastic. Thanks, Trevor. Okay, we're going to move on to our next question, and touching on very briefly what Lynn mentioned there with, there's been a real hit to public transit during COVID. And I think we're all hoping and anticipating that those numbers are going to go back up to where they were and far surpass where they were at before COVID. But there will likely always remain a number of people who are not necessarily interested in taking public transit and would instead prefer to remain in their personal vehicles. Now, we know that the federal government has a target to ensure that all new vehicles will be electric vehicles. I guess the next question that we have for folks on this panel is what the city is doing to prepare for the switch to electric vehicles in terms of infrastructure. And if there's any work that's going to be done in terms of incentivizing folks to make that switch to an electric vehicle in the few years coming ahead. We'll start off with City of Hamilton for this one.
Sure, great. Thanks, Bianca. And again, I'll do my best to try to provide an all-encompassing answer here. But if there's any information I miss, I apologize. So the City of Hamilton does understand the electric vehicle revolution is here and it's happening, and all cities need to prepare for this. And so just this past spring, the city would have completed the installation of 24 dual head, so 48 EV charging stations on public properties across Hamilton. And by increasing the grid of EV charging stations, that really will help to reduce range anxiety. And especially with the new EV vehicles that are coming out that have the longer extended range, it will really get rid of that range anxiety. Now, the City of Hamilton does want to be a leader in this. And so through our green fleet strategy, which was one of the key actions that came through our 2019 corporate goals and areas of focus report that we presented on earlier on, our fleet division did complete that green fleet strategy. They applied for an additional 1.2 million approximate increase in our capital fleet budget to essentially transition 89 of our light duty fleet vehicles to battery all electric by 2024. Now that will be a significant reduction in our corporate fleet greenhouse gas emissions, and we encourage and by doing that, we will hopefully become and be that leader in electric vehicle. We can show them off. There's pictures on our city website, and people can come and see them too, and check out the EV charging stations as well. And so that's what we're doing on the corporate side, and installing EV chargers. There continues to be research done in our zoning through our zoning bylaw reform to take a look at what tools in our municipal toolbox can we implement that will either encourage or require private developers and private development to install EV charging stations within their private development. So ensuring new buildings will have the proper and adequate infrastructure for EV charging stations. And that's a bit of a snapshot that we're doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Trevor. City of Burlington, what have you been doing to encourage EV ownership and infrastructure?
Yeah, no, it's great. So under our climate action plan, electric mobility is definitely a key priority area. We recognize that active, sustainable transportation options are very important in the city, but to meet our net carbon neutral target and recognizing that electric mobility is becoming more and more important, we are working with Burlington Green to develop the electric mobility strategy. We're just starting this project, and actually for Burlington residents, there will be a survey launching any day on our Get Involved Burlington website. So you can go in and give us your thoughts about electric vehicles. And actually, we also have surveys on e-bikes and e-scooters as well, the stand-up e-scooters. We have a number of electric vehicle charging stations that have been installed in our downtown core. You'll see them around a lot of our parking lots to encourage members of the public to use and charge at our facilities. We don't charge a fee for connecting to our charging stations. at this point in time. Council's very supportive of not doing that right now because they want to encourage people to adopt electric vehicles. And we are in the process of expanding our electric vehicle charging network as well. We're applying for funding from the Atmospheric Fund to support increased number of chargers at our recreation facilities. And we've also got funding, council approved funding for a fast charger in our downtown core, which speeds up the time it takes for you to charge your vehicle. So yeah, it's definitely a priority area in Burlington and something we're really focused on. And I'm excited to be working with Burlington Green on this project.
Fantastic. Great. Well, so now that we've talked a little bit about retrofits and about helping folks with and encouraging EV ownership, I'd be amiss to say that a lot of these items can be out of reach for a lot of Hamiltonians and Burlingtonians. It's not necessarily affordable to all. And so on the side of affordability, can folks speak to what consideration the cities have given to helping the climate-friendly, environmentally friendly option be more attainable for all Hamiltonians and Burlingtonians? And if there's nothing currently on the table, what sort of initiatives are currently being sort of mulled over and thought about at the moment? We'll start with, I think we'll start with Burlington this time.
Thanks, Bianca. Yeah, we're really trying to, I think, at the implementation stage, getting a little bit of feedback. Is that okay? We're good? Okay. The implementation of our climate action plan, as well as the development of our climate resilient Burlington plan, we're really trying to apply that sort of equity lens to the work we're doing. And especially on the transportation side, I think we recognize that, yes, electric vehicles is not going to be open to everybody, but that we need to apply that lens that our transportation infrastructure is accessible to all ages and abilities. And that's why active transportation and public transit and making sure that those types of services are available and open to everybody. So walking, cycling, we've got the right infrastructure in the right places. We have a safe, mobile city, and public transit is efficient and covers all areas of our community. With the home energy retrofit program, we did talk about that and making sure that we are looking at that low income sector and how can we support them, the delivery center. And I think also important is that we're working across municipalities too to support each other and that we're not just working in our own silos to try and solve all these problems. That Trevor and Andrea and I and our friends in Oakville and Halton Hills and Milton, we talk frequently and share information. But maybe I'll let Fleur just jump in to talk a little bit about, again, the climate resilient Burlington and just the sort of the assessment of vulnerability and risk and just the lens that we're applying there.
Yeah, so as I did mention earlier too, there are the subsidy programs, right? So that are being offered to help reduce your flood risk. So through both Halton Region and also through Burlington with the building waiver. There was also a pilot that started a few years ago in Burlington, actually through the University of Waterloo's Intact Center for Climate Adaptation. So it was looking at assessments where someone would come into your home, or through COVID, it could sort of be done online as well, where they're actually looking at your property and assessing whether again, how to flood proof your property. So there are also subsidies. At some point that was a free assessment, and sometimes there are subsidies offered there. I'm trying to think, sorry, I lost my train of thought. with respect to the plan, yeah, we are looking at an equity lens as well through it. We're trying to. It's our first, our first adaptation plan, but looking at things like resilience hubs as well. So, looking at the potential of assessing the feasibility of maybe working with higher levels of government with respect to extreme heat as well. Right now, there are regulations for maintaining the temperature in your home in the winter, for example, right? So you can't have, if you have a rental unit, for example, you're taking the cold into effect, but now we're experiencing extreme heat. So what's going to be happening with more vulnerable populations if you don't have air conditioning in your home, that sort of thing. Or as Andrea mentioned too in her presentation, if you're in a basement apartment and you flood, then what, right? If you're living, it's one thing if you own the house and you can, your basement flooded. Oh, maybe it's an inconvenience because I live upstairs, right? Like I have bedrooms upstairs, but what if your home is in the basement and it's flooded? Then what? What's going to happen? So we are sort of looking at all of these initiatives as well, and see once the plan is approved by council, then moving to the next step of implementation.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. That really painted a picture, I think, for a number of us. Thank you for sharing that. Hamilton, tell us a little bit about what you're thinking on this front.
Yeah, thanks, Bianca, and great answers, Lynn and Fleur. And maybe just to build on that as well. So overall, the city of Hamilton really tries to make as integrated and multimodal choices available for all populations. And so over the past few months, there has been some concern about the city of Hamilton's bike share program and how to fund that. And the city council did approve to fund the bike share program. And so that is a program that citizens can go and either for free or use their credit card, rent a bike and take that bike across town. And so we build our cycling infrastructure, build out cycling infrastructure, separating cycling infrastructure to ensure as much as possible that those routes are safe and separated. I also, and all of that information can be found on Hamilton's Sustainable Mobility Program, and there is an annual update on the bike share program, our smart commute program, our travel planning at school program as well. So I invite anyone who's interested to learn more to check out our Sustainable Mobility Program. One thing too that we want to be very, we want to move forward on, and this is why we have moved forward on applying to federal government funding, is the Building Retrofit Program, and very much focusing on creating a flexible program that loans money, low interest, to homeowners in order to retrofit their homes to live more comfortably. And so that was an action that we modeled through our community energy and emissions plan, but very much didn't want to wait to implement that action. And so we proceeded to submit that grant application prior to the plan going forward. I maybe just want to give an opportunity quickly, if it's okay, to hand it over to Andrea as well, to talk about some of the EDI work that she's been working on climate adaptation.
Thanks, Trevor. So before I get into the adaptation stuff, I also just want to point out to anyone who's listening that some of the things that we're talking about today are also being addressed by other levels of government. I know there's pressure on both the province and the federal government to support the resale market of electric vehicles, for example, for those people who can't afford to buy new. So if that's something you're interested in, you might want to look into that. On the adaptation side, equity is hugely important. Access to solutions is not equitable between different communities, and making it more complicated is that the barriers are different depending on the form of discrimination that a community is experiencing. So on the adaptation side, we've taken a very in-depth approach to understanding the different barriers that are faced by different communities. We've involved, I believe, 27 different community organizations to provide us with that kind of insight, so that the plan, when we develop it, will address those barriers and needs and really provide the resources to the people who need them most. And we're also doing some research through a pilot program to test out some of these approaches for extreme heat. We recently completed a survey, and we're learning some interesting things about some of the reasons why the solutions that are commonly offered may not work well for everyone. So for example, a substantial portion of the population we surveyed doesn't have access to the internet and can't get extreme heat alerts. So, and if they don't have access to the internet, how do they learn about things like cooling centers? So we're learning some interesting data that we're going to apply to our programs going forward to make sure that everyone can access the resources that they need.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrea. Okay, we're going to finish off with one final question that we've received in the chat. It's a tougher question, but we're going to end it on a fun note. Okay, so we've seen other cities elsewhere that have committed to banning future natural gas hookups as they expand and build new buildings. Is that something that is being considered by City of Burlington and City of Hamilton? If yes, can you tell us a little bit about that? What considerations are there to be made? And if not, why not? We'll start off with City of Hamilton for this one. Everyone's
Great.
uncomfortable laughs said everything we need to know. Go ahead.
Great. Thanks, Bianca. And this is a question we have asked internally because we do see cities like Vancouver and some cities in the East Coast as well looking to ban natural gas in new development. So we definitely have started this conversation. I'll preface my answer with the regulatory framework of development in Ontario is very complex. Even someone as myself who's we work in public health, but we do work closely with our building division. I continue to learn more every day on the regulatory framework of how the Ontario Building Code is created. So the how buildings are built in Ontario is regulated by the provincial government through the Ontario Building Code. That, however, does not regulate utility infrastructure coming into the property. So when we speak with our building division colleagues who go out and inspect buildings, there is a portion of the Ontario Building Code that deals with energy efficiency. It does not deal with or regulate the type of fuel that is going into that building. So they feel themselves that is beyond their regulatory jurisdiction. So again, going back to what are their existing tools in our municipal toolbox. And so there are clauses in the Municipal Act, and I don't want to get too technical here, but as municipalities, we are entities of the province of Ontario and must abide by the rules and regulations of the province of Ontario. They do allow municipalities some wiggle room through the Municipal Act and allow municipalities to pass bylaws respecting things like health and safety, as well as new clauses such as climate change. It is quite open-ended, and so no municipality that we're aware of in Ontario has moved forward on a climate change type of bylaw for banning. I would be more in favor of looking at how do we create something similar to what's happening at the national level for the national model energy codes that creates a timeline and tiered approach to get to net zero buildings, which is now part of the federal mandate through the Pan-Canadian climate change framework. And so we want something that will get us to where we need to go, while it's providing the direction and the, what's the word that I'm looking for here? The stability that the developers want to see. We've talked with developers and we've talked with businesses, and the thing that they hate most is uncertainty from changing government regulations. So I would definitely be, I'm personally and professionally in favor that municipalities and we will, through our community energy and emissions plan and our creating green development standards, look to the feasibility of creating that tiered energy approach to get to net zero buildings by 2030.
Fair enough. Thank you, Trevor. Burlington, what are your thoughts and plans and considerations when it comes to banning natural gas hookups moving forward?
Can I just say ditto? So, Trevor did a fantastic job explaining the regulatory framework. So we're, obviously we're in the same boat, but it's something that we'll be working with some of our networks and other municipalities to assess what are our options to do that. We know that there's some developers that are ahead of the curve. Sifton Properties down in London did their West Side 5 development, and as far as I know, no natural gas hookup to their development. And they did that on their own because they wanted to build a green community. So we know it can be done, depends on the context of things. We have a number of developers that have used geothermal systems in their buildings in Burlington. So we know that there's the capability of doing it. It's just how can we accelerate it, shall we say? So that's something we'll need to look into. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Len. That being said, unfortunately, we have run out of time for the evening. I'm pretty sure we can go on for hours, but tonight we had just one. I'd like to thank our city representatives, Andrea, Trevor, Fleur, and Len, for joining us and offering such thoughtful responses. Thank you to everyone watching for sending in your questions and for engaging in this crucial topic. Your excitement for climate action sends a clear message to government decision makers. You can continue sending that message loud and clear by following @BayArea_climate on social media for more climate action. This concludes our Ask Me Anything event. Thank you and have a great night.